In the Gun, episode number 51. Spring ball is in the books. It's time for a little recap, some portal updates, and a new significant rule that is certainly going to have an impact on college football this season. It is In the Gun, your favorite new WVU football podcast. Even though we're coming up on our year anniversary here, it's still your favorite new WVU football podcast. I'm Wesley Uhler, flanked beside the signal caller, Jed Drenning. Our dear Owen Schmitt is dealing with a bad case of the strep throat,
And the little guy, our
little
little
guy.
football
That's right.
player too.
That's
Yeah,
right. And Beer Truck Jr. is
yeah.
on the IR as well too. So he needs no explanation to the two of us. This has hit Jed's household. I've had some family that have dealt with it as well too. Just the last month or so, this nasty I don't know, what do you want to call it, version of strep, this nasty
Yeah.
strain of strep that's been going around. Hopefully Big O's doing all right. So we gave him the night off. He's on the mend.
Yes, he is, and he needs rest. He needs fluids. We kind of just did the assumptive closed and text each other and said,
Yeah,
"Dude, you got to rest." Yeah, I hope he's not even answering our text thread, right?
that's right.
So after talking to him or texting him, we were texting back and forth last night, getting the updates and knowing the impact that nasty stuff can have on. My wife had it, my youngest boy had it, my mom had it, my niece had it. It's just nasty. So let's hope. And you know what? It happened right after his engagement. Now
Yeah,
we didn't get to talk to him about when he
I
spoke at
know.
Tulsa Monday night. So it happened sometime right after that or during that or so. We're hoping
Well,
that he gets back on his feet soon.
yeah, absolutely. And pretty cool recap video that the WVU sports accounts put out on social media of that Charleston scholarship dinner, and nice soundbite of Owen and Tony at the end there talking about how you should smile every day because you're a Mountaineer. So pretty cool stuff. We will make sure to get the goods on everything that happened down there in Charleston from Owen at some point here, maybe in next week in our episode 52. As hey, spring ball's in the books now, so we're gonna start having to fish for some content to gold rush for some content here. I've got the whole list. If you're watching on YouTube, I got the whole list of our off-season content,
Yeah.
ideas here. But
We won't run out.
we'll certainly catch up a Big O and all the good stuff that happened at the Charleston scholarship dinner. We wish him and his family the best as they are on the mend. This episode of ITG brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.ag, your number one source for all of your basketball information, stats, news, and scores. You can get the latest odds, lines, player reports, and more for this year's basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, and they have you covered for all your sports wagering needs, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, UFC, or boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information, including live betting options and all your favorite casino and card games that you can also play right from your home. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Use the promo code Bleav when you sign up to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. Jed, some headlines here to get us started as always. More portal moving and shaking. On our last episode, we talked about, hey, don't look now, but the transfer portal window is open once again. Well, we've had a early coming and going, an arrival and a departure to the WVU football program, here in the first couple weeks of the portal window being open.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, Wes, that we added a defensive back in Beanie Bishop from Minnesota. It's almost like, listen to Neil and you'll see some of these things coming. He had talked for several weeks about the addition of a DB, if not two DBs. I still almost anticipate another corner coming in. And he talked about the possible addition of a wideout. And what ends up happening is a couple Jalen's end up on the move. All right. Jalen Shelton for West Virginia has entered the portal, a defensive back. Meanwhile, Jalen Ellis, a Baylor wide receiver, who was very highly coveted. He was an Army All-Star All-American, played in the Army All-Star game. Very highly coveted kid coming out. 6'3", buck 84. He has a large frame, some size to him, some height to him, but his biggest asset is his speed. He is a deep threat. He's a shot kid who can take the top off of coverage. And one of the things that appealed to him about West Virginia was the plan the staff has in place to use him for more than just a shot play guy. Okay, to have a more nuanced and refined role in the offense and just taking the top off the coverage. Not that we didn't need that, because you did see Cortez Braham with a big spring game really step up just when we were hoping he would. I think Jeremiah Aaron is on the fringe of stepping up, because one of the questions that I had, we talked about this in the pregame at the stadium on Saturday. One of the questions that I wanted answered is, okay, I do think that Devin Carter has established himself as the alpha of this group. No surprise. I mean, when you look at the body of work that he put together at NC State, and every practice that he's had this spring, he's just been the model of consistency. That huge frame, his ball skills, he's a difference maker. And you saw some of that in the spring game as well. I was really excited that the fans got to take a look at that. So you recognize, okay, there's our alpha. Well, what happens when teams push their coverage to him and roll defensively toward his side of the field? Is anybody going to be able to step up in this group and capitalize on that? And I think to some extent you saw what you saw to Cortez Braham. Maybe he's the guy. Again, I think Jeremiah Aaron has some opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
Preston Fox plays a unique role, with that group. There are others, but the addition of Jalen Ellis as a speed guy makes that a lot more difficult defensively once you insert him into the mix as a guy. Now, remember, we talked about one of the additions that we haven't seen on the field yet because of injury, Davis Mallinger. And that was all about inserting some much needed speed into this unit. So now you're going to have a rough around the edges, raw, far from polished Davis Mallinger, who's trying to return to the form that he was in high school as an exceptional receiver with tremendous speed.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have Jalen Ellis, who spent the last couple of years at Baylor as their deep threat guy. So I think it's a great addition. It's a unique addition, but we've talked about these windows, Wes. It's almost to the point where I think coaches around the country might be looking at their clocks, looking at their calendars, and counting the days to close this window.
Yeah,
at the end
of course.
It opened earlier than expected. Again, we talked about it last week. The Division I Council moved the initial date set for the first 2 weeks of May to the last 2 weeks of April to coincide with spring ball and to put these kids in better position to enroll by the summer and get involved in summer workouts. But when you look at what's played out, you're kind of counting the days down to the end of the month. And then at least you can take somewhat, I don't want to say a deep breath, but you can take a breath, because then it's just about targeting who has entered the portal to try and address your needs instead of worrying about having additional needs that you didn't see coming. So knock on wood, here we go. The closer you get to the end of April without losing kids. And speaking of losing kids, it's been in the news, Wes. Real quick, what's your thoughts on this too? Colorado now at 51 kids. Scholarship kids have entered the portal since prime time took over. Now you kind of get
17 since this past weekend.
Since their spring game, and including the start of the game and that receiver that had 154 yards, last year's leading receiver. The list goes on. But what was interesting was I heard a Colorado insider, and this was 2 or 3 days ago, and this situation's very much in flux. They've added some since then. But even when the number was in the mid-20s in the last handful of weeks, he said, look, the only one that we really didn't see coming was this receiver that was the leading receiver in the spring game, who was dinged up some last year, but he was productive. He was a 3-star coming out of California a few years ago. But you kind of get the sense based on what I'm not out there. I don't know, but based on the reports, it sounds like some of this is very much being forced by the hand.
Yes. Well,
Dion wants some of these kids out.
I don't know if you saw, I know you were busy today. Dion went on with McAfee this afternoon and basically said we were expecting this. We've already got a plan in place. Just wait. We've got guys coming in. This is all part of the process. I'm paraphrasing there, but Dion went on with McAfee today and kind of threw some water on that fire of saying we were expecting this. We've got a plan in place. We've got replacements in place. Just wait and watch the process here. So
now there are people pushing the extreme on either side of this, right? Because like one of the kids' dad played on the 1990 Colorado National Championship team.
Right.
And there was a big dust up about Dion kind of forcing him out. But one of the national sports writers in the tweet that I saw promoting the story that he did, he said, here's basically what Dion said to this kid. Hey, turn your strengths into your weaknesses. With your frame at 6'8", 310, I think you got a future. Somebody will grab you out of the portal. You got a P5 future. I'm like, what's wrong with that? I really didn't see the evil that they were trying to position as. But there's also reports, again, I don't know if it's been verified or not, that he's not allowing kids access to their tape.
Yeah.
Staff's access.
I've seen that as well, too.
I don't know if that's been verified or not, but that's kind of crazy if it's true. But so some of it's being overblown, but again, the tape thing, come on, the kids are gone.
Yeah.
You gotta,
Yeah.
and again, that hasn't been verified. So, but that's kind of where things are at in the portal. So it will be a story until it's not. And in terms of this, we talk about the portal being a two-way street. Well, one of those streets is about to close for a while here in a few days. The other
Yes, it
side of the
is.
street is going to stay open because it's still plentiful with kids that have previously entered that you can pick and choose from over the course of the summer, et cetera, so long as they entered within the constraints of this period right now. But so keep an eye on it.
Certainly will. I'm waiting for it to count down like a lot of the coaches across the country.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep you posted on all the moving and shaking here as we roll along throughout April and the offseason. Of course, final headline here before we talk a little more spring ball. We had discussed this not on our last podcast, but one of the just a few episodes back, about how there were some, as there always is in the offseason, proposals about rule changes and potential rule changes around collegiate football. Well, Jed, one of the ones that we talked about was that they could potentially be in this, never-ending quest for every sport now, it seems like, to speed their games up a little bit and, take 3.5-hour games and make them closer to 2.5, 3 hours, much like the pitch clock in baseball, some of these other things that we've seen. We told you how there was a proposal, there was discussions about potentially stopping the clock from stopping after first downs. We all know there's, a few kind of major differences in how the collegiate game and how the NFL game is governed and officiated. One of them, right, is the 1-foot catch versus the 2-foot catch. Another big one is how in the NFL you have 2-minute warnings at the end of the half and at the end of the game. In college, you have the clock stop until the ball gets reset after every first down. Well, that is not going to be the case anymore, Jed. No more stopping the clock after first downs in college football. It's passed. It's, I Bleav, Division I and Division II only, where Division III it did not pass. But this is a WVU show. We're talking more about the Big 12 and everything that affects the Mountaineers. Jed, I'm interested to hear your take on this because I know you've had some time to think about it, and I know you're always well thought off with these things. But I don't think this is some seismic shift to the game, like the transfer portal, like NIL, like conference realignment. But this is also a pretty substantial deal. This will have an impact on games, particularly this year, but just in the foreseeable future.
The conversation we had a handful of episodes back, Wes, was about the rules that were under consideration, the rule changes. Okay.
Correct.
Now, there were 4 of those rules, and we both agreed 3 will probably pass, 1 won't. Now, fortunately, we were right, because you want to talk about a seismic shift. The one that didn't pass under consideration was not stopping the clock after incompletions.
Right.
Which would have been, that doesn't happen at any level of football.
Correct.
So that failed as it should have. Now, the 3 rules that did pass, 2 of them right out of the gates make perfect sense. You wonder why it didn't pass before. You can't call consecutive timeouts. Okay. In addition to that, if there is a penalty at the end of a quarter, there's no longer an untimed down off the clock. You just move to the next quarter and play the down, and the clock moves. No big deal either way. It should have happened before.
Correct.
Now this one, it's not as big as some might think. There's 2 ways of looking at this. One, does it speed up what the offense has to do in terms of running the next play? And the answer is no, because you always kind of had the 40-second clock ticking anyway to prompt you for the next.
Sure.
This really, the difference is the overall game clock being reduced to eliminate a certain finite number of snaps over the course or balance of 60 minutes, which it will. They suggest it's going to be, I think it's 5, 6, maybe 8 snaps per game between the 2 teams over the course of a 60-minute game.
You said 5 to 8 per team?
No, per game.
Just total. Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. So, I would have thought it would have been closer to a dozen or so, but
you could that makes sense. It's single digits. And you could argue, at least the study suggests that. And you could argue that, okay, maybe it's perfect time for West Virginia, which seems to be constituted or built offensively, especially, to take the air out of the game. Deep running back room, veteran offensive line, athletic quarterbacks, enough weapons on the perimeter, maybe take a shot or 2. You could argue, if West Virginia is in fact going to try and shrink the game, what better time to do it? So it could play to our slight advantage if that's what we're trying to do. But again, just a handful of plays. Now, a couple of things to point out. there will be a stoppage of clock with first downs in the final 2 minutes. Now, you might be thinking, well, a big deal. It's still going to reset and they can run off as much time as they want to anyway. Well, again, go back to the first thing I said, prompting you from one snap to the next. You're not going to be hurried if there's 8 minutes to go in the second quarter to run your next snap.
Right.
But you are hurried in a 2 minute, potentially in a 2 minute sequence to run your 2 minute offense. What this means is you don't have to run an NFL style 2 minute offense and clock play everything you do to buy time for the next snap. You still have time with the chains being reset and the stoppage of the clock in the final 2 minutes to get set up for another play without wasting it down, spiking it on a clock play. So it does play a role there. And another good point, Rick Neuheisel made this point, as he always makes a lot of brilliant points. He said, look, when you look at the argument that they're positioning themselves for, the powers that be that run the sport at large, we're about to add at least a game to those who advance all the way to the championship with the expansion to a 12-team playoff. So now what you can say is, if you were previously playing a dozen games, okay, well, you're trimming 5 to 6 to 8 snaps a game. That starts to add up to the point that it's nearly a game.
It's about a game.
We're adding a game, but look what we've done. We've kind of reduced the game's worth of snaps.
Interesting.
So it at least puts you in position to make that argument and pretend that you're considering player safety first, when in fact you're not. But because the truth is, this is more neatly going to fit into the confines of those TV windows. Yes. That's really what about this timing sequence is about. It's not about necessarily fans minding if a game's 3:27 instead of 3:14. Some want to get out there a little quicker. I get that. Sure. But on average, it's going to be a negligible difference for the most part.
You're not knocking a half an hour off the game.
The exceptions are going to be, the extremes are going to exist, right? But for the most part, most of the games that exist in the middle, it'll be a less than appreciable difference.
10 minutes, 12 minutes.
But what it does, those handful of minutes set the networks up more neatly to fit into, okay, I got an early game, a mid-afternoon game, a prime game. It sets them up for that.
Your noon game doesn't run into your 3:30 game. Yeah.
So now you can, and I've heard it suggested that they might put more resources into post-game shows, more so than pre-game shows for that reason.
Knowing there's going to be buffer time.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of, I can understand people not being used to seeing a rule this talked about, this discussed, but at the end of the day, it's not quite the seismic shift that some might suggest when you reduce it down just to those very essentials.
No, that's well laid out by you, and that's interesting because, like I said, I would have guessed it was closer to about a dozen snaps a game, but the numbers shown will be 5, 6, 7, 8. That is not.
Let's say it's 7 snaps, just somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
The key is, okay, make sure you're the team that just loses 2.
Right.
And the bad guys,
the other team lose 5.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
So that's going to be the key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it is. Listen, I understand it. It's a significant rule change, but I think you're right. I think when you really dig into the numbers, it's not as seismic as some people have been making it out to seem, but it's certainly something that, again, it is significant. We'll keep an eye on that as that goes along throughout the season, and we'll obviously be ears to the grindstone for any any effects or any ripple effects that could have across games and things.
I'll close with this. What's interesting to me is you wonder why the NFL product seems like every time you turn around, every game's coming down to the final possession. Well, college is heading in that direction. That's very much by design.
Correct. Okay? 100%.
They want rules that foster scoring and foster competition. So it's difficult. It's now more difficult in football than ever to hold a lead. Why? Because all the rules changes over the course of the last half century at both the collegiate and pro level benefit the offense. So it used to be if you got up by 3 touchdowns under the old rules of 1971, right. It was much more difficult to mount a comeback.
Absolutely.
But now we've had 50 years worth of rules changes to help the offense cut into that 21-point lead. So it does come down to the final possession. But what's interesting about this, you can make an argument this might be the first one in a while that goes the other way.
It's true.
It doesn't.
It's true.
So Interesting.
It's about time, for all of our
Yeah, that's
for all of
right.
our
Yeah.
for all of our people that are on the defense. I got a quarterback and a fullback on the show
Yeah.
with me here, but I know there's some linebackers and some DBs out there who are saying,
I
you know what,
promise you those D
it's about time.
coordinators were
It's about
raising a
time.
glass to this one. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks to our friends at Fortis for presenting this episode of ITG as well. For roof performance and financial security guaranteed, make sure you're checking out fortis.us.com. Also, a shout out to Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Thanks to Toothman for being a presenting sponsor of this episode of ITG. Checking out their website. They've got a great inventory tool there. You can see everything that they've got before you get on down to Grafton, because cars do cost less in Grafton. All right, Jed, to close us down on this episode here, let's kind of, spring ball is in the books,
Yep.
both the practices and the spring game now, as we approach the end of May and the end of the semester here. It's, pretty soon it's really just going to be Randy Mazey and the boys that are the only ones left on campus
Yeah.
doing anything. And man, they
Our
rolling.
first place, Randy Mazey.
That's right. Atop the Big 12 and just smoked Penn State. What, 12-2 last night? I think they beat Penn State.
Couple salamis,
Yeah, a couple grand salamis. You gotta love it. Absolutely great stuff. And we'll be going around campus and keeping you guys. We'll have little blurbs on the baseball team as we roll forward. Big week for the basketball team as well too, as Bob Huggins and company continue to pick up some impressive transfers. Jed, they just got a kid today who's ranked like the 22nd overall transfer player available. They've already gotten the 4th best available. They've already gotten a couple other guys that are ranked in the top 20 at their positions.
A 22nd ranked kid fortifies what was already by many considered the number 1 ranked transfer class in college basketball.
Pretty exciting. It is.
Yeah.
And it's a new frontier. So it's something that we're kind of at the forefront right now, this whole new world. And so, yeah, it's, a lot of us, I think, we've even had some of these conversations and concerns that, in this NIL world, could programs and universities like WVU that don't have all the money in the world to throw around, could we fall behind? Well, hey, hat tip to Bob Huggins and company for figuring out a way to adapt and even put themselves in a better situation. I mean, 2 years ago,
such a unique animal.
It
really
is.
It's 10 guys in shorts.
You need 3, 4, 5 guys. Yeah.
If that, right? And so it makes perfect sense to me that the brand equity of Bob Huggins fits so neatly.
100%.
They finally figured out, wow, Hugs brand resonates with some of these kids in the portal that yield the most value. So I think they've connected those dots, and hopefully we're heading to as good a place as it seems with this.
I think you're absolutely. I mean, Jed, this time 2 years ago, Bob Huggins was coming off of one of his worst seasons as a head coach, point blank, period. I mean, from his time in Cincinnati, Kansas State, Walsh, everywhere else that he's been, it was one of his worst seasons he's ever had.
Didn't adapt well to the portal out of the gates.
Correct. I mean, that team lost like 16 of their last 17 or 18 games 2 years ago. I mean, it was dreadful. And last year they bounced back to being ranked for a portion of the season and making the tournament again. And now hopefully even, going to take that to another level, win some tournament games, maybe contend for a Big 12. It's exciting.
Bear has learned these new tricks.
Hey, who said an old dog can't learn new tricks, but an old bear can.
That's right. He has learned the portal.
There you go. Spring ball in the books here, Jed. You kind of laid it down there, I thought, very nicely. Your takeaways on the wide receiver position is we discussed the addition there of Jalen Ellis as well. So, we got a few minutes left here. Tell me some of the other things, with spring ball in the books now, like I said, both the practices and the game, some other things that have stood out to you, some talking points from the last few weeks.
Well, let's start with this. The offensive line, just in general, without the central piece of Zach Frazier there throughout the course of the spring, I was impressed by their level of cohesion. In other words, I expected more leakage, not just, you saw it some in spurts throughout the 14 practices, but even in the spring game, I would have anticipated it. We're tinkering with guys at different spots, moving Doug out the tackle. You have Jaquay and Brandon on the interior, a combination of center and guard. So you were trying different things with different personnel groups with different kids. You would expect that to lead to more leakage than what you did. I think they held up fairly well. The defense had its moments for sure, but I would start with that. And I do think that we learned some things within that group as to what these guys are capable of to put us in a pretty good spot heading into the summer and certainly into camp. in terms of the versatility of the group. And now with Zach coming back,
Sure.
you know, we know what Doug can do. You want to be fortified from tackle to tackle, whatever that might mean, wherever that might mean, placing your best 5 kids. And then, of course, we have a very sturdy and stable 6th guy, whether it's a combination of Jaquay and Brandon or whoever it might be. So that's where I'd start. That leads to the depth of the running back room. It was beautiful to see CJ doing CJ things again. It was just so refreshing. There's just something about that kid that, again, when I watch the practice tape, when I watch the spring game and break it down and evaluate it, he just has it. I marvel at the fact that he's so limited in his exposure to this position. It just speaks to his natural skill, and he has been working to refine that natural skill set. And there's just something to him. But to see him in a contact situation, be productive, score the way he did, that was nice. We know the depth we have behind him, but I don't know if Mountaineer fans knew and appreciated the extent to which that depth truly reached, all the way down to 5, however you want to shuffle that, with Jaheim. I mean, we talked with Trey on the recruiting show, and Trey and I both marveled at Jaheim. I mean, this kid, another white, right? Here comes yet another white.
That's right.
Into the
Patrick,
program,
Kevin, now Jaheim.
So Jaheim, he is a dynamic, twitchy kid. He was special in his high school tape. I remember I spoke to his high school coach at York High. They just can't say enough positive things about the type of kid that he is. What a tremendous addition to the program. And Coach Brown told me right on the field in our post-game interview, he said, Jed, this kid he's forcing his way into getting some snaps, and he's going to be part of what we do. Now, I remember before the recruiting show, John Antoniuk reached out to me and he said, hey, I'm going to do a story. I want Jed's picks for who he thinks can contribute the quickest out of this group. And of course, you know, you're going to have your James Hurds, you're going to have, you know, your Ben Cutters, you're going to have your Josiah Trotters.
I was going to say, if Josiah wasn't injured, he would have probably been high
He
on
certainly
that list.
If he wasn't injured, he certainly been part of that. But I mentioned Jaheim, and he texted me back because we're communicating through text. And he said, Jed, do you really want me to go out there and write this with the 4 we got? And I said, I'm just trying to be objective about this, John. I said, if you want to talk about college-ready kids, irrespective of what is or isn't in front of them, who they can find a way to somehow, some way plug you in and help you, this is one of those kids.
Sure.
And we always talk about what's, you know, this kid will look like after Mike Joseph spends a year and a half with him. The lower body of Jaheim, because again, it sounds, blasphemous almost when you make comparisons to Deuce, right? Deuce Vaughn, because we all think the world of Deuce Vaughn.
Sure.
But that compact frame, when you get the lower body strength that comes from Mike Joseph and the tenacity of Jaheim in that weight room to really pair with that, because he's so twitchy, he's so low, his center of gravity is so low, and it just gives those guys such an advantage. I mean, even when they go down, they don't go down hard.
Right.
I mean, right. Yeah, you'd think durability is an issue with these small guys, but the truth is, when they get tackled, they don't have far to fall. I mean, they really don't. When you watch, even when Deuce goes down. So that was one of the surprises. I think fans were very pleasantly surprised with that. I was glad they got to see that. We talked about the wideouts. It was nice to see Devin take one up top the way he did. We talked about Cortez Braham making plays. How about Cole Taylor? Again, something we've seen through 14 practices, but it was nice to see the fans get a chance to see it. I mean, I even asked.
He's exciting.
I was asking Neil toward the end of the game before, you know, things were closing down. I said, how high do you think that ball was in the air that he had to go up and bring down? And he's like, I hadn't thought about that. Let's do some math on that, because first of all, the kid's 6'7", he can jump. He was outstretched. His wingspan's incredible. So he has some skills to him. And just, you talk about the ultimate security blanket for a quarterback. I mean, that ball, Nico made a great throw under pressure, but he had to throw it prematurely. If you go back and study the tape, it's amazing to me how early Nico released that football. And it tells me the way he anticipated that route, that the quarterbacks have already developed a little something.
Sure.
Cole Taylor. So there's a shorthand with the body language of the routes. And because Nico was under duress and he had to rip that thing very early, way before the break. And to see Cole rescue him with that type of effort and athleticism and the catch that he made.
It's exciting.
But even the simple things. I mean, some of the things that the fans might not have noticed, like I noticed when we went to 21 personnel, which Owen and I have talked about, we expect us to see a lot of that. It's 2 back and a tight end. Okay, with the depth we have at running back and having the tight ends we now have, you do expect to see that. Well, we went 21 personnel, but we flexed Cole, so it wasn't a true pro set. And what we did was we ran a flare screen to Jalen, and to that side was Devin Carter to the perimeter, out wide on the corner. He sealed the corner, made a nice block, stocked him up, and here comes Cole Taylor swinging out to make his block. So we had a nice 2-on-2 that was really to our advantage with those 2 big physical kids making open field blocks in space. And Jalen picked up like 15 yards on an easy first down. So from a play caller standpoint, that's how you win games. That's how your job gets easier. A little flare screen is a 15-yard pickup. Now you're calling another first down. So that was nice to see. Great addition, Cole Taylor. I think that, and we'll close with the quarterbacks, but I want to say on the defensive side, Montre Miller has continued to make plays and be effective with the football in the air.
Yeah, I'm excited
and
about
react
him as
accordingly.
well.
I mean, there were a couple times that it appeared as though he might be in a bad spot, but once the quarterback released it, he closed the gap, and his reaction time was incredible. He's a football player with the ball in the air, and that's really a premium skill for a DB. Aubrey Burks picked up where he left off last year. You really want to see that, locking down that back end for us. And across the front, we knew Sean wasn't going to play. That was precautionary. Nothing going on there, but expect big things out of Sean Martin. But I'll tell you what, Hawkins, this kid we got from Tennessee State who started his career at Kentucky, he consistently, throughout the course of the 14 practices, I'd find myself every time somebody made a disruptive play in practice, because of the angle of the checkerboard tape on the coach's tape, but I have to go back and watch it to see the number. And I'm looking at my 2 deep, my depth chart, and I'm going back to the numbers, and I'm like, that's him again. I mean, how many times did I say it? It kept me Hawkins, and it got to the point that I almost suspected it was him, and I was right. So, and he did some of that in the spring game. So I expect some big things out of him. Now, as the quarterbacks go, again, we can say all these things, and they're true about, from a protection standpoint, Garrett got the better end of the bargain, right? The wideouts performed, I think, for both of them, as we talked about. The great catch by Cole Taylor from Nico. But all that's true. Now, it was a better opportunity the way the O-line played. And it was a collection of sometimes the 2s, sometimes the 1s, sometimes against the 1s, sometimes against the 2s. So it wasn't just like Nico played with the 1s Nico played with the 2s and Garrett played with the 1s. No, it was mixed up.
No, yeah, they mixed it up, yeah.
But just for a host of reasons, they really shored things up in front of Garrett. Now, all that being said, Garrett absolutely made the most of his opportunities. Out of the 2 of them, let's take off the table the things that we can't control and just put on the table the things that we can and what we saw. Garrett Green played winning football. No doubt about it.
Yep.
And you know what? We've always known that he throws a beautiful deep ball for the time capsule, such a beautiful spiral, his timing, his rhythm, his ball placement, the way he outside shoulders it. We've always known that. So the question, and we've always known he's a dynamic, explosive kid when he decides to extend a play or take off and make something happen or see what's going on downfield. But what you want to see is kind of the cracks between the keys on the piano. And that's the backside curl that he threw to Devin Carter for the first down when he looked play side to the field, and late, after going all the way through his progressions, came backside and didn't just find Devin on the curl, but bounced him with his throw to the outside window away from the flat player. That was beautiful. I loved seeing that. I loved seeing just a little third down conversion where he hit the jet slant. He made a beautiful read on the flat player, threw it right off his ear on the slant to Huddy. So first down there, another one. It's not going to make the headlines, but that's how you win games, those types of conversions. The RPO to Cortez, yeah, the fans notice what a big play that is, but I hope they appreciate all the moving parts that were on it, because Garrett and I, even right after the score, we were on the sideline talking about it, and he was walking me through chapter and verse on that RPO, what exactly he saw, when he knew he had it, what he had to do to execute it. And it sounded to me like, quarterback to quarterback, this was a kid who was absolutely speaking with a command of what they were asking him to do.
Nice.
And we saw that from Garrett. Now, again, for 14 practices, I saw a lot of it from Nico as well. A lot of it from Nico. But it just so happens on Saturday, absolutely hats off to Garrett Green. But it sure is to have two nice ones, in a competition, making each other better, that I do think are two kids you can build around and win with. But that's kind of what I saw. And it was really nice to see Garrett respond and step up and make.
Oh, yeah.
He did,
I think you're spot on that. Listen, it's April. I mean, there's still a lot of time until, we get to Labor Day weekend and what we think is allegedly a kickoff under the lights in Happy Valley, right, at Beaver Stadium. But I think if the Mountaineers played a meaningful game on Saturday, it would probably be Garrett Green under center starting at this point. And I would say he certainly earned that. I think throughout spring practice, you're right. I think we've seen the growth from both. But Garrett just, he's had a little more time in the program and with the coaching staff. He's a little more seasoned, and he did. You kind of take away some of those other factors. I thought not that Nico was poor or anything like that, but Garrett was Garrett was a little bit stronger this past weekend on Saturday.
Too. I do think, and Neil pointed this out, just the rules of the spring game with both of them being in white shirts, you can't bring them down. That inhibits the ability of both those kids, because I do kind of think, and again, it's the old offensive guy in me. Sure, I have a little bit of a bias that way, but I do think the lion's share of those whistles that were blown to protect them, if that's real bullets flying, they're shaking free.
They're shaking a lot of those. Yeah.
Both Garrett's shaking free. And the most exciting thing both of those guys are going to do is when you see them shake free.
Correct.
That's the truth,
right. When the script goes out the window,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. When the defense thinks they have them dead, but they don't.
Right.
And Nico and Garrett do a lot of that, and they couldn't do it.
They certainly do. We're hoping that that one of them is going to do a lot of that in September, starting in September and all season long.
And by the way, if you feel bad that we don't have a quarterback settled on yet, take a peek at Alabama.
I think there's a lot of programs that don't have it. Listen, it's April.
Bloods. Yeah. Yeah. At least
we've got
their options. Yeah.
We've got about 4 months, 4 months and a week or so here until meaningful football is played. So a lot can change between now and then, but I think you should be excited about the progress that both quarterbacks have made. Let's continue the competition, and we'll obviously have plenty of time to discuss here where the chips may fall down the line. Final thank you to our friends at GoMart for presenting this episode of ITG. Here to keep you going. Make sure you're signing up for your GoMart rewards as you travel all throughout the Mountain State and beyond. Jed, great stuff. Good breakdown here today. I enjoyed this. Spring ball in the books. Maybe that's what we'll title this episode, but obviously we'll have plenty more for everybody to come here. We will catch up with Big O hopefully next week, find out what happened at that Charleston dinner, and reminder,
recapping draft next week too.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where Dante and BFW end up, and we have this entire list here of off-season show ideas and content. Still working on some cool guests for you, so plenty to get to. But this will put a bow.
Will never be a problem.
Never a problem.
Forcing Wes and I to have an unexpressed thought. That's the problem.
Honestly, the problem is like, hey, could we knock one of these episodes out in 20, 30 minutes, right? Where Jed and I were like, we'll keep this one to 20, 25 minutes. Well, here we are pushing 40 minutes. So again, it's never really a problem for us to kill some time. So all the best, everybody. Hope you're able to enjoy some of this nice weather as the calendar gets ready to turn here into May, and all the best to the third amigo.
Happy anniversary to my better half, by the way. We're taping.
There you go.
26th. So happy 20th to my far, far better half.
I love it. I love it. Chrissy. Absolutely. Congratulations to the Drennings. 20 years. That's awesome. And we will continue to wish you 20 plus more happy ones. How about that?
It's been a lot longer than 20. It's just been 20 married.
Well, there you go. There you go. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Reminder, as always, the one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast, itgfootball.com. Make sure you're rocking and rolling with us on all of our social media channels.
Shorts.
And Jed continuing.
Go viral this week.
We had a short go viral. Yeah, Jed has a really, really cool short. Only 7 times in school history have the Mountaineers won back-to-back ranked games. Well, they did it on the road. only twice on the road. So Jed put together, and those happen to be against Virginia Tech and Pitt, two programs that we feel a certain type of way about around here. So we're continuing again. It might be, and I'm using air quotes here if you're not watching on YouTube, it might be the off season, but we've still got plenty of good stuff to.
I was
to
a
bring
little
you.
disappointed, by the way. I have to toss this in here, Wes. I asked Daryl Talley on Saturday during the broadcast because he was in the booth with Tony for a segment, and I was like, "Hey, I got to ask you, just when you thought you couldn't hate Pitt any more than you already did, right? Here comes LaShawn McCoy throwing shade at your boy Jim Kelly. Did you see this, Wes?
I did, yeah.
Well, apparently Daryl hadn't seen it. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You got to look into this. I'm telling you, you'll ratchet your LaShawn McCoy say, yeah, 4 Super Bowls. How many did you win, buddy? Come on, man." I was like, "You got to look into this. Your hatred of Pitt, because I know he reveres Jim Kelly, Daryl Talley."
Oh, I'm sure. Any Buffalo person with a shred of respect, I think, reveres Jim Kelly.
McCoy spent a couple years in Buffalo because Tony was asking, "What's LaShawn have to do with it?"
Yeah,
but yeah. So I had to throw that in there. But go ahead.
Well, that's hilarious. LaShawn, who got his 2 Super Bowl rings by being in street clothes, I think, in at least one of those games, and not playing any meaningful snaps, going to take shots at Jim Kelly. I tell you, well, hey, really? That's Pitt. That's Pitt class. That's just what you expect.
Beat cancer 3 times. He's like, get that hell out here.
That's just that's typical inbred trash hillbillies at Pitt. Oh wait. Oh, sorry. No, wait. Okay. All the best, everybody. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you soon. As always, you know where to find us. For Jed Drenning, I'm Wesley Uhler. You've been in the gun.